Welcome to Boys in the Hood TV. Today we're going to be discussing the death of a 5'7" neighborhood Crip named D-Rock. Now in the early 2010s, there was an active war between the 5'5", neighborhood Crips and the 5'1" trouble Gangster Crips. Now the 5'5" and the 5'7" are both closely aligned with the neighborhood car, with 5'5" neighborhood Crips being located on 55th Street and the 5'7" being located on 57th Street between Normandy and Vermont, and the 5'8" on 58th Place between Slauson Ave and West 59th Street. Now directly across 54th Street sits the 5'1" trouble Gangster Crips. Now in 2009, there have been a string of shootings between the neighborhood Crips and the trouble Gangster Crips. And in September, a 5'1" Gangster Crip named 007 had hunted down and shot and killed a 5'5" neighborhood Crip named Tiny Demon. Now 00 was sentenced to 80 years in prison for this murder. Now this death would lead to more back and forth violence between the gangs. Now the 5'1" Troubles has multiple cliques within their hood, like Hallsdale, Fig Side, but their most active clique and most dangerous is Flatline. Now this clique has a reputation known for shootouts and catching bodies. Now one of their frontline soldiers and shooters at the time was Marquise Calliz, aka Tiny Crumb. Now on December 27, 2011, only 2 days after Christmas, members of the 5'7" neighborhood Crips were walking outside a store on 55th and Normandy. 28-year-old Andre Lockhart, also known as D-Rock, and a 16-year-old named Stephen Wade, also known as Tiny Drawdown. Now this store was a known kicking spot for the neighborhood Crips. Now as D-Rock stood on the corner, his sister named Talitha would drive by and wave before parking the car a few houses down at their parents' house, which was not far from this corner store. Now as D-Rock and Wade stood talking on the corner, another vehicle would ride down Normandy, which D-Rock didn't recognize. He noticed that the car was turning down 55th Street where they were at. Immediately, he would tell his little homie, Wade, to keep his eye out because he had a bad feeling about this car. But moments later, as the car pulled near the store, right in the middle of the street, Tiny Crumb would hop out the back seat with a gun and start shooting. He would let off 5 to 6 shots, and both D-Rock and Wade would both be struck with gunfire. Now in the midst of the shooting, D-Rock would be hit in the leg and directly in the forehead, and Wade would be hit in his body. Now D-Rock's sister, Talitha, would run inside the house as Tiny Crumb hopped back into the car and they fled the scene. Only moments later, police and EMTs would arrive at around 2:20 p.m. and transport both Wade and D-Rock to the hospital. Now 16-year-old Wade would survive his injuries, but sadly at around 8 p.m., 28-year-old Andre Lockhart, aka D-Rock, would die from his injuries. Now detectives will begin investigating immediately by canvassing the area and watching surveillance footage from the corner store. Now the footage would show the shooting, but the officers were unable to make out the face of the suspect due to the low quality of the video. But 3 days later, police would interview 16-year-old Wade, who was still being treated in the hospital for his injuries. Now Wade would tell the police that he and D-Rock had just walked to the store when a car pulled up and somebody hopped out and started shooting at him. He would give a description, and he would also tell the police that it was likely the 5'1" Troubles. Now 2 months later, in February 2012, 16-year-old Wade would identify Tiny Crumb from the 5'1" Troubles as the shooter who shot both him and D-Rock. He would also pick out Tiny Crumb from a photo lineup. Now afterwards, Wade would send a picture of Tiny Crumb to D-Rock's sister, Talitha, in a text. He would tell her that the homies from the hood know exactly who it is and that they was gonna handle it. Eventually, the police would bring in Talitha, and she would also pick out Tiny Crumb in a photo lineup as the shooter. On February 6th, police would arrest Tiny Crumb on suspicion of murder. Now during the interview, they would tell him that they had him on camera killing D-Rock in front of the corner store on December 27th. But Tiny Crumb would deny being involved in any shootings completely. So later on that day, police would place Tiny Crumb in a cell with an informant. Now during this conversation, Tiny Crumb could be overheard telling the informant that he was a shooter, but the gun that he used for the murder, he had already got rid of that same exact day. He would also tell the informant that his homie Moreland, aka Tiny Mickey Mouse from the hood, was the getaway driver. Now, only weeks later, this would lead to the arrest of Rayvon Moreland. Now, once Moreland was in custody, he would refuse to answer any questions from detectives. So police would later then put him in a cell with an informant, and during this conversation, Moreland would admit that he was the driver and that Tiny Crumb was in fact the shooter. Moreland would go on to say that he planned on making a call to a big homie because he felt like Tiny Crumb may have been trying to implicate him in his murder. Now, eventually, detectives would start to scrub through social media, and they would stumble across Tiny Crumb's Facebook page, and he would make numerous posts referencing the shooting. Now, months later, before his hearing, Tiny Crumb would make a phone call and be overheard telling a female named Noelle that he needed her to be his alibi because shit was getting real. Now, by the time the trial came, Moreland from the 5-1 Troubles would testify during the trial and would admit that he did drive down 55th with Tiny Crumb, who did in fact get out of the car and start blasting. But he would go on to claim that after the shooting, Tiny Crumb threatened his life and told him not to say anything about what just took place. Now, also, 16-year-old Steve Wade would testify, but he would completely recant all of his statements. The reason being, his family, mainly his father, feared for Wade's safety. But during his testimony, Wade would admit to being associated with the 5-7 neighborhood Crips, but denied knowing anything about their beefs and denied ever seeing Tiny Crumb at any point in time. Now, ultimately, this trial would end in a deadlock and would be declared a mistrial. And sometime later, Moreland would accept a plea deal on manslaughter charges and would be sentenced to only 10 years in prison. Now, once the second trial was underway, neither Moreland nor 16-year-old Wade would appear to testify in person. Instead, their testimonies from the first trial would be read to the jury in the second trial. Now, the defense would argue that the defendant, Tiny Crumb, had every right to face his accusers, but this motion would be denied. So during the trial, Tiny Crumb would take the stand and deny everything, which included the shooting, and he would go on to state that the police misinterpreted his jail cell conversation with the informant in reference to the gun. But with the amount of evidence against him, including multiple witnesses, Tiny Crumb will be sentenced to 90 years to life in prison for murder, attempted murder, and firearm enhancements. I would like to thank everybody for tapping in, and I'll see y'all next time.